Welcome to my needlebook tutorial. In the description below this video, you'll find a link to this PDF of written instructions for the needlebook with pockets. And in the videos that follow, I'll take you step by step through making this basic design, as well as some jazzed up alternative designs, including one that's entirely hand stitched. So thanks for coming along, and let's get started. We're going to jump right in on a very basic design, just so that you can see the basic construction, and then along the way I will show you some variations that you can do to make it look a little bit more personalized. So first of all, I hope you read the written instructions. That will be helpful, and watch the video and then fill in the gaps with the written instructions. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. But basically, here's the pieces that we're going to use. This is my front piece, and this is cut 5.5 by 8. And this is my lining piece on the inside, same size. These are my two pockets. These are 5.5 by 5.5, and we're going to fold those in half and press them. And then they will sit on the inside of this lining piece. With the folds to the center. Like this is going to be your book on the inside of the book. And then I have a piece of interfacing, which is cut just a little bit smaller so that it doesn't get into the seams and make things too bulky. This is our felt page for the inside. And I'm going to do a very simple ribbon or lace closure that just attaches to the spine, and then it ties closed at the opening, or all the way around the book or at the opening. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is put our interfacing on the back side of our front cover. Now this fabric doesn't really have a back or a front, so it doesn't really matter. If your fabric has a right side and a wrong side, say like this ticking, you would put the interfacing on the back side. So the interfacing has, this is iron-on interfacing, and it has little bumps on one side. That's the adhesive side, so that side goes to your fabric. And I'm roughly centering that so that it just doesn't get in the way of my seams. And I've got my iron set up here a little bit off camera, and I'll just press things as I need to. The interfacing just helps stabilize it a little bit so that it's a little more like a book, rather than too flimsy. So, okay, and I'm going to press the pockets as well, folded. That just makes those easier to work with. Okay, and now we're going to pin all of this together. And this is right sides together. So the front side and the facing side of your inner lining goes there. And then we're going to pin this together. We're going to leave an opening so that we can turn this. Don't mind my pins that are all bent. I'm a little aggressive, I guess, with my pins. We're going to leave a little bit of an opening to turn it. And the place that I like to do that is at one of the bottoms in between the pockets, or either the top or the bottom. So that you don't have to mess with the pockets. You know, those are sewn in really good. It's not a very big gap. I said to leave like maybe a 3-inch gap. I'll still try to do that. So we'll see how it comes out. Hopefully I can leave 3 inches and have a little more room to turn it. If you don't have pins, or if you want to use clips, those little sewing clips are kind of nice too. So use whatever you have. Okay, and let's see, is that about 3 inches? Yeah, pretty much. I'm using my grid mat there. So if I get most of the pocket, I think that will be fine. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this around in a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I will come back to you. Okay, so I'm going to trim my threads. And take out my pins, and you can see how I did the stitching here and left this gap open right here. That's where how we're gonna turn this. But before we can turn it, we have to trim the corners or they'll be too bulky. So don't cut your stitching, but trim really close to it and trim the corners off at an angle. Okay, and now we're going to turn this out right side out. I usually start with a corner and then kind of gently go into another corner, the farthest corners from the opening, and just to kind of gently get it started in there. Kind of a pain. This is probably why I sew on paper more than fabric, because little things like this. Okay, and now we're going to use, use your fingernail, whatever. I don't like to use scissors, especially if my scissors are really sharp. Sometimes you can use like a pencil or a pen nib that a click pen, so you can leave it unclicked open. But you try and push out your corners a little bit, just so that it's not too bulky in there. I'm gonna need to use something. These scissors don't have too much of a blunt tip, so I'll do that. And you see, as I'm turning this, my pockets are actually turning with the outside, but that's easy enough to you just turn them. Don't worry about that if it comes out that way. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just the way that it turned. So I try to poke those out as much as I can. As long as your scissors are blunt, so you're not poking through, because you will run through the fabric. Okay, so there we have that. We're going to press this, and we're going to press this opening. We're going to press it just like it was part of the seam, and then we're going to stitch that closed by hand. So let me press this. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. I like to stitch that on the bottom if I can, but if your fabric has a direction, it doesn't really matter whether it's at the top or the bottom, because we're going to try and stitch it with a kind of an invisible stitching. So this is what it's looking like. And we're going to stitch this closed, and we're going to stitch the felt piece in the center seam. So I'm going to thread a needle and get started on the hand stitch. My quick method for doing this hand stitching, it's called a whip stitch, but I tried to make it a little bit invisible. I don't really like to see my whip stitching. Oh, sorry. Having trouble threading a needle. So I'm going to double my thread. This is regular sewing thread. I'm going to double my thread and tie a knot in it. I'm going to hide the thread by just sort of bringing it in under the, or hide the knot by just pulling it underneath there. And then that'll get enclosed in when I'm stitching this. So I'm taking just small stitches of both halves. And then when I take the next stitch, and I think I need to go back a little bit because I missed the beginning, go through the fold and then do your stitch where you're catching both sides of the fabric, the pocket, the backing, the front, the lining, all of it. But when you go through another stitch, instead of coming to the back like this, your stitch would show. I try and take it through the folds of the fabric. Of course, that would be smoother if you didn't get a knot. Okay, there you go. See how you cannot see the stitches much. Oh. Okay, of course I'm going to get knots. Okay. So I am going to go through and whip stitch this whole thing closed. And I'm going to do it off camera, I think, because I'm getting so many knots in this thread. I won't put you through that. Okay, so we did that. We did our hand stitching. You can see, you can hardly see the threads. That's the way I like it. Okay, so now we are going to put the center page in the spine. And I'm pretty much just an eyeballer. If you want to measure, you can. If you want to press them open or press it with a seam, you can. I don't usually fuss that much with it. I kind of finger press it, and that's good for me. I can see where to line it up. And then I just pin it in place. Actually, I think I'm going to do it this way, because I'm going to stitch on the machine, and then that way I can see my line. Now, I want to put a closure on here though, and this closure for this book is going to be this ribbon that goes around the book. So I think what I'm going to do is tie it on there and figure out where I want the bow to sit. And then that will help me figure out the placement for tying it. everything is the right length. Okay, so I want this to be like here. So I will put another pin that catches that lace. And this way, when I stitch this seam, I'm getting all of it. Okay, so I'm going to stitch that, and then I will be back, and our needle book will actually be done. Okay, so our needle book is finished in the basic construction. There are things that you can do to jazz it up a little bit. So this particular one is going to be just a simple tie closure. I might tie knots in the ends of these, end of this lace because it's fraying a little bit. But I want to show you a couple of different closure ideas, plus different variations that you can do on your cover. But for right now, let's just close this one up, and then I'll come back in another video to show you some of those variations. Oh well, got the ribbon twisted in there, but you get the idea. So I'll be back with another one to show you some variations.